Hello, and welcome back to the Break the Twitch podcast on minimizing distractions and doing more of what matters through minimalism, habits, and creativity. I'm your host, Anthony Ungaro. In podcast episode number 22, I'm chatting with Don Ball, the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Fueled Collective, a network of co-working spaces spread across the Midwest. Don was truly at the forefront of the Minneapolis co-working scene back in 2009, before anyone knew what co-working really even was. He has a ton of experience to share in this area. We discuss a wide range of topics centered around creative habits and entrepreneurship, how Don fuels his writing, modern definitions of success, and what Don calls hustle porn, constant messages that if you're not working 16 hours per day, you're falling behind. You're going to love this episode and find lots of inspiration for your own entrepreneurship and creative pursuits. This podcast is brought to you by the Break the Twitch member community. The community has tools, strategies, and an amazing supportive community to help you remove distractions and do more of what matters in your life every single day. So visit breakthetwitch.com/community to find out more about what is available and to join up to support the podcast. But for now, let's start the show. So Don, how's it going today?
Today's just great.
What are you up to?
Oh, what am I up to? I mean, at what level should I answer that question, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of different levels for that question. But let's see, what are we up to this week?
This week, I am writing a lot of copy at work. And it's a co-working business. You know, we started out, it was a movement. Now it's kind of a business. And there's a lot of competition. And it's become, you know, a tough game. And so I've been focusing on just writing all the content that we are using because we're finally professionalizing our marketing and creating what they call a full stack, or not a full stack, a full funnel approach. And so you basically you're writing lots of pieces, you're writing lots of blogs and social posts, and I'm kind of doing that, which means I hide away for hours at a time as I'm able to, and try to just go back to being a writer, which is what I started doing in life. So if it's a week where I can do that successfully, then I feel really happy. But if it's a week that gets cut up with lots of little meetings and stuff, then it kind of makes me grouchy because, you know, it's that whole thing about, you know, there's the managerial kind of schedule, you know, in which you're a manager, and that's basically your week cut into hour chunks. And it's all about just pretty much getting in touch with other people and coordinating and syncing up. Then there's a creator's schedule, which is really about having large chunks of time, you know, the whole morning, the whole afternoon, in which you are not sidetracked or interrupted. And you get to kind of go through the creative process, which I think a lot of people know it's a very inefficient process. You know, you don't sit down and for an hour and within 5 minutes you're in it. I mean, it might take you an hour to get into any kind of train of thought, another hour to explore some bad ideas that ultimately don't help you, so that you can finally in your third hour get to like something that feels productive. And that's just how it is every time, it seems. So you need a big window of time to indulge that process. So a long-winded answer to your question, that's what I've been doing, writing. And I think I had a pretty good week. I finished a white paper. Not white paper, it's kind of an ebook that I'm writing for small businesses.
Nice.
And it's kind of the general idea is like, what are all the things that nobody ever tells you and that you can't learn? And, you know, you couldn't go to an entrepreneurial MBA program and figure out how to run some aspects of a small business. It just is like basically trial by fire. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of writing about those things.
That's awesome. We will definitely go back to the beginnings of Coco at the time.
Sure.
But because you just mentioned this, and I find it fascinating, you mentioned that the creative process
Yeah.
takes a couple hours, and that's been my experience. Like, it never goes well in the first 15 minutes.
You've noticed that too.
Sort of,
yeah.
You sort of have to get in the zone or
Yeah.
into this flow state. What does that look like for you? How do you zone in? Is there an environment that works well, or what is it that works for you?
Yeah, well, okay, so now we're going to uncover another. I'm going to touch on something else, which could be another rabbit hole. But one is, I don't think it's formulaic. I don't know if it should be formulaic, like where you find your one thing and it's that way every time. You may find that for 2 days a certain approach works fine, and then you got to switch it up and go do something different. And so I think that's one thing to note. It's like I can tell you what maybe generally works for me, but I guarantee you I'll try it tomorrow and it will go south, and I'll have to do something different. But I have an internal locus of control, and this will explain a whole bunch that I say the rest of the podcast. In other words, I do not do well applying external structures to my life and how I live it. I generally kind of got to go with how I feel and what my gut is, and like. So when I think about, okay, it's Monday morning, and I think tomorrow I've got the most of the day free. So I face this question like, well, what do you want to do? Well, some self-care is important too. So I don't get up at 8 o'clock. I mean, I probably get up at 9, and I prioritize feeling as rested as I can. So maybe I get up at 9 o'clock. I have some coffee. I look through Reddit. Maybe, and it's some of my favorite subs there. And I just kind of like take it easy. I don't kill myself. Then I go take a shower and I think about where am I going to go. Now, if I'm writing, this is like the dirty secret of which I've affirmed with other co-working space owners, is that when you really have to focus, you don't go to your own space. So I don't have a membership at another space, although that might be an option, but I generally will hit a coffee shop. And that's because they're, if I go to one of our spaces, odds are there's some people there who I've been dying to talk to and maybe have been eager to talk to me. And we just have a lot of conversations and I don't get my stuff done. And then I get in trouble later. So, because I have other people depending on me, like, get your stuff done so the designer can do her stuff and we can get photos. And, we have a schedule we're trying to hit. So I'll go to the coffee shop that has the mood that I need that day. And I might buy myself a nice drink so I can settle into that. So it would look like if you were an observer, you'd say like, this guy's really kind of lazy and is just kind of has this self-indulgent, kind of schedule. But mostly what I'm managing, and rather intuitively, is energy. Just like my positive attitude. And if I can create and maintain that positive state, then my experience has been that I get some good stuff out of that. I get some good writing. And then there's also just there's just accidental things that happen in that process that day. Like there's been some days where I said, no, I'm actually going to I'll go to the Art Institute. And I know that I'll get a charge by just taking a run through their modern painting section. That's a thrill ride for me. So I might do it that day because that's just kind of what I need. And then I'll go hang out in their little cafe down there. So all I have to say is like, I don't even know how we got here, but that idea of a creator's schedule is almost naturally idiosyncratic, and it might look self-indulgent from the outside, because it isn't just like nose to the grindstone kind of process.
Yeah, your words are igniting something in me right now, and I've really been struggling with what you're talking about right now, in the sense of I know that I work best within a self-care first, which is the word now. Self-care is the word now,
I know.
And but it's real, right? And I've always been like when I have the energy, then I do my best work,
right? And
it's hard to be there if you're not taking care of that. You mentioned it's like that fire, right? That keeping it stoked, keeping it going. And that's something I've been struggling with, is like schedule the things, like go out, do other stuff. It's so easy as an entrepreneur, especially, to just let the thing you're doing consume the days. And then you're feeling like, why am I not outputting as much as I should be? And there becomes all these questions of like, it goes down a weird hole for me too, of like, am I ever going to be able to do as much as I feel like I need to do? And is this moving fast enough? And all these things. And I always have to return to when I'm energized, when I'm around that energy, when I'm taking care of those things, the other stuff happens when I go to a coffee shop, when I get the things done.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about the being in your own co-working space as well is like, I'm guilty of that. Like whenever I see you, I'm like, done. Like I want to see you and catch up.
It's a really good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that like, if what you really need to be doing is, trying to
down.
And it's different for everybody, but yeah, if you kind of have some things, some deadlines, and it's funny because there's kind of like I guess it would be a corollary, but there's an opposite, train of thought on the creative process that some writers and some novelists, will people who really write significant amounts will talk about, and that's just get up and fucking write. You know what I mean? Like you just have you get up in the morning and you write. This isn't about cultivating preciousness, and being like, oh, well, if my mood's right and the stars align, then I'll be able to write, And I get that too. That's a real thing, is like just produce. But I think that maybe is a little more, I don't know. I haven't examined too much like why. I might be somewhere in the middle there, but I'm happy with where I've arrived at how I manage that stuff. And what happens is, when you can hit a state of, flow where you just like, all right, you've got the energy, the ideas, you've found like whatever the righteous nugget is within the thing you're trying to write about. And you're saying like, okay, this is a gem because there's so much I can do with this raw idea that I have. I can take it in this direction, that direction. Then you've uncovered something that's really got some, it's got some legs. And then you're in a good state to carry through with that. I found that I can do 3 days worth of work in one day when I find that. And so I think that's part of what the process is that I'm cultivating, and maybe that a lot of us cultivate, is like you're trying to get to that state where like you're on fire and you can just crank out some good stuff, and it's got, and there's a lot of power in the writing. You feel like you are speaking to people, and it's like it's elusive, but it's like you're ever in search of that.
Yeah.
Of that moment.
Yeah. That is a concept so important to me that literally that's what all of Break the Twitch is about, is achieving creative flow. Now I talk about minimalism, removing distractions. That's clearing out clutter.
Yeah.
Habits is the showing up every day, putting the boat in the water and hoping for a wind.
Yeah.
But that third element of creativity and exploring what it means to create is seeking creative flow. And the times that I've seen that the most personally are when I was writing my book, which was an incredibly, incredibly difficult thing for me. And I had all kinds of distractions going on, and I was trying to sit down and write, and I'd get 300 or 400 words out. My developmental editor would be like, okay. and then, yep.
Wow.
And then I would go to a coffee shop. I would use some browser plugins to block everything. I'd turn off my internet. I'd let that first half an hour of just kind of thrashing against it a little bit, just kind of, we're going. But then as soon as it hit, I'd do like 2,500 words in 2 hours.
Wow.
And I had a very direct feedback loop from my editor, and she'd always say like, those days, like this is your best, it's cohesive, it flows from one end to the next. And I didn't improve as a writer day to day.
Interesting.
It was those days that I allowed myself to get deep into that place where the words, the process just came through me. It was amazing. And so I've been obsessed with this idea of achieving creative flow as much as possible.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. You said, so I hadn't improved as a writer, which if what you're describing is something that I've always noticed and have envied in really great writing, is that great writers are great thinkers. That it's the additional thinking power, the insight, the ability to discern or you coalesce ideas that are not obvious to mere mortals. That's what makes a great writer. And then, of course, to be able to put some words around it. But if it was just good words, well, then whoever is the greatest stylist wins, and it isn't that way. It isn't just that you can put these words together. It's really like the power of the thought behind it. And so when you think about getting into a flow state, like what we just each described, you on those with this work that you're turning into an editor, and me with these days where I can do 3 days of writing in one, and it's good, it's powerful, is like I think it was maybe more the process of getting to that deeper well of thinking and ideas, and then the words are just there to help you convey it, but you had to get into that. You had to get into that, whatever that territory is that on your weaker days you can't get there, but somewhere in the mountains there's a little hidden valley, and when you can get into that, you find gold.
Totally. 100%.
To stretch the metaphor.
To keep going, yeah.
Yeah.
I always think of it like the Sisyphus, but a little different. Like every day I'm trying to push this boulder up over a hill, and as long as I can get it to the peak through that blank page syndrome of sitting there staring at a blank page, not knowing what to quite write about, through that discomfort, as long as I can push it over the top, some days there's going to be a nice long hill for it to roll down on the other side. Other days it's just going to kind of, but but you got to push it up there to find out, and that's what my experience has been.
That's interesting.
Over and over and over.
It's a good metaphor because it has built into it, of course, the fact that the boulder will come back downhill. It's just whether it's the hill you were just pushing up or it's the other side.
Exactly.
But either way, it's coming down.
It's coming down one way or the other. Especially even thinking about like weeds and flowers on your way up. If you you see something, you're like, oh, I gotta grab that. You pick a flower and that thing goes back down. So it's like really being in that zone and that focused place that gets you up there. That's how it's been for me too. And it's interesting hearing your own experience with that, because it's something that's been so fascinating to me.
Yeah. But it's really worthy. It's kind of. I'm a business owner, but now that I'm doing what I'm doing in service of that business is on the creative side of things, and it's kind of it's a familiar territory. I also paint, or I used to paint, and I am thinking of coming back to it. So that's another thing where it has its own creative process, but it's very much like it fits the same pattern, even though it's a different discipline. So I guess my thought is that like this is something that rings true across different endeavors. So I'm believing it right now, that the creative process, and it's a thing to be respected, and a thing to really kind of apply your time working on.
Let's step back a little bit and talk a little bit about what was initially coworking, and what hit you the moment, if there was like something that really drove you. Because I'll have to say personally, Coco and now Fueled Collective has been a really big part of my own story in doing something different.
Yeah.
In exploring entrepreneurship, exploring what a different kind of career path could be.
Yeah.
And so I have my own kind of experiences through that, but I would love to hear what inspired you in a time when, sort of call it the sharing economy, was young, pretty young. This was a pretty new thing. What inspired you to create a place like Coco, and what were you looking to do with it?
It was scratching a personal itch first. I'd say that I had just come off of about 4 years of working from a home office, although I had 2 other business partners, but they were in other locations. So it was me working alone a lot of days, and then some days that was great. Like I'm an introvert. I don't necessarily on every day want to go and see a bunch of people. But then there were days in which I definitely needed the input, and I needed the socializing, and only going to the occasional like meetup or conference or something like that doesn't quite satisfy that. Definitely conferences, no, because a lot of that would have been, back when I was, in the marketing business. Most of that was like listening to people who seemed like uber successful, describe their great lives, and I would just feel like a total, a schnook. Like I got nothing going on in my life compared to that. They're wealthy, they're all that stuff, and so that just invited me to compare, and that did not turn out well. And then my interactions in in the hallway time between sessions because I didn't know anybody, so I didn't really have great interactions with people. So basically, I just was like felt like a wallflower, and so conferences never went well for me. The change for that was when Michael Roventine put together. Not him, also Rick Mon started it, and then Michael took over. But Social Media Breakfast, which is how I met my now wife. Which is how I met a lot of people. It actually has really turned out to be responsible for a lot of contacts I have in the world. Patrick Rohn, I met him through that.
Oh, cool.
Met Phil Wilson through that. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Well, what that taught me was that you can get to know a lot of people from the comfort of your home on social media. Like we all had our Twitter handles. And this was early Twitter days. So it was really exciting that through something like Twitter, and I would not say the same of that platform now or social media in general. Like we can have a social media, tirade later. But in those early days, it was the idea that like, wow, you can connect across socioeconomic status. You can go across, like kind of a success spectrum. If there's a favorite author you have who's on Twitter, you could actually ring them up and have a conversation with them, which was just astonishing. That suddenly you had this like mobility, social and professional mobility that you never had before. And so suddenly like you can circumvent that situation of going to a conference. And what happened was that I went to a conference and I knew everybody already, right? And so it was really just a matter of like, oh, you're so-and-so on Twitter. How you doing? Like, you have friends already without even having met them physically. That was exciting. That was super heady. And so when I saw the co-working thing, what it made me think was it was like that experience, but all the time. It was like the social media meetups, but it's happening every day of the week. And so I heard I heard that there were people in town who were interested in the co-working space. They had a little like wiki page, but no one had done anything yet. And then it was a weird confluence. Like it was a Wednesday that I met up with, my business partner Kyle Kulbroth. We met for lunch. We hadn't talked in like 4 years, and we came back to this idea we had 4 years ago, which was going to be like a offsite meeting kind of location where teams could come and we would have like a little cafe on the side, and we would have this like kind of a black box theater that we could reset by day part, so that like you could have different activities by day, and the sets would change to accommodate that. And even part of that, we'd say like, yeah, well, what if we also invited various people to come and hang out, and they could be a resource. They could be like people who could be brought in to help with the meeting. And so we were knocking on that kind of co-working door without even knowing it. So we meet on a Wednesday in 2009 in October, and we came back to the idea, and I said, well, have you heard of this co-working thing? And he's like, that sounds really interesting. And so we just left the conversations and we're like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of like what we were talking about, but more. And that Friday, somebody posts a thing. It was Zach Steven. He was putting together a co-working experiment, and it was at Crema Cafe in South Minneapolis, where they make Sonny's ice cream.
Okay.
So apparently, like in the winter, they're not open because nobody wants ice cream, but they still have a whole cafe and everything. And so he cut a deal, said, look, each Monday of November, we're going to bring a bunch of people, and will you make us lunch, and we hang out for the day and serve us coffee, and we'll each pay you so much. So we just all paid a subscription to hang out there all the Mondays of November 2009. Well, we went to that, and it was like a who's who now of people who are in kind of like tech and creative and they were just all there because they wanted to be around other interesting people. Mm-hmm. And it was successful from the first minute. Like everybody was excited to be in the same room. There was amazing conversations and connections and people meeting others. So if you think back to that time, it was all the dopamine that you were getting off of being on Twitter and then meeting people who you follow on Twitter. So by the third Monday, Kyle and I had already cooked up a plan and presented it to everybody. And so part of that included we we had to go talk to the building owners, Jeff and Roger Heegard, who are kind of minority partners in our business, and we talked them into giving us a run with this because we knew they were sitting with an empty building in Lower Town, and or largely empty, and we convinced them to like let us use the space and pay for the heat.
There you go.
and so we were able to give it a run that way, and so we moved so fast on that, which I think is also like there's something instructive about that, about doing less deliberating and more kind of like just chasing after it, because it was basically we spent 1 month, December of 2009, prepping the space. We painted, we built furniture.
1 month, wow.
And then we opened in January. And so it was really fast. We didn't even have time to kind of second guess. And I think there could have been, if we'd really thought about it, there was a whole bunch of reasons not to do it. I mean, it's risky. So yeah, so I guess that was that's how we got into it.
So you say there were a whole bunch of reasons not to do it. Obviously, there were a bunch of reasons to do it. Did you go through any process to assess those, or was it more based on a gut?
It was a lot of gut because we just didn't know. We didn't know what could go wrong. We didn't know, I mean, largely we given the deal we cut with the Heegards, we probably could have walked away from it. So maybe we had that if it hadn't worked, we'd all like go home and the Heegards would be like, well, we were dumb to do that. They would have been like, crap. We gave up rent and we paid a bunch of HVAC for 6 months or whatever, and we'll never see that again. But that was the risk they took as investors. So anyway, it was kind of, in the first months were hard because we had a hard time attracting members because nobody ever like had coworking as a thing that they paid for. So you have to convince somebody that, hey, there's this new category that you need to spend on. And they're like, I'll just go to a coffee shop, and they're like, well, this is different than that, So we had to do a lot of cajoling, convincing, and it's a noteworthy thing that a year and a half later, so July, August of 2010 we opened. So July, August of 2011, we opened on the Grain Exchange in Minneapolis, which was a big space and a big lease. Like they had a lot of zeros on that lease. And, and the way leases work is if the business doesn't work, you don't just get to walk away. You made a personal guarantee on that lease. So they're going to want the entire lease, So it's 5 years. It's like take monthly rent times 12 times 5, and that's what you owe them. And so it's a personal disaster if you don't make good on that, unless you declare bankruptcy, which I suppose is an option. But so there was a lot of zeros on that lease. Even though now I look back and I go, that was a sweetheart lease. I mean, we got a good price on that thing, but it was a lot for us at the time. And then in that July when we signed on that, we only had 35 paying members over in St. Paul. And now some said, yeah, the minute you open Minneapolis, we're coming. But we didn't know if that would really work. So that forced us to really sell hard and try to pre-sell into Minneapolis and, just do everything we could to populate that. But basically on the first day though, because none of the furniture that you would see now if you went there that occupies about 2/3 of the space was set up yet. It was just up on the upper deck. So this what's our co-working commons now. That was the only place that had any furniture. The rest of it was a big empty. And so that was that was like a visual reinforcement of like, this might not work. Like you might not ever populate the rest of this gigantic space. So I don't know. It's easy to look back now and just, and kind of go like, remember how scared we were, but it's weird because it's almost like you have to keep ratcheting up. I mean, like we're looking at a new lease now on a new space, and it's the biggest one we've ever looked at. It's got yet more zeros, but the nature of the whole endeavor now is that you can't succeed by shrinking. You actually have to go bigger and bigger with it, and which means you're investing more in the space and the build out and the fit and finish, and because that's what competition has brought is like everything's getting nicer and nicer and more well appointed, and they're nicer spaces. You're not taking just taking an old brick and timber warehouse that you can get for cheap isn't quite cutting it.
That feeling, let's say when you signed that lease. So the first agreement in St. Paul was like kind of a, like you said, it was kind of a let's try this out sort of thing.
Yeah.
But let's just say that first signing of the lease at the Grain Exchange, which is a beautiful building, and that's actually where I started out going when I was attending events and doing things there. And that was just a wondrous sort of building. I mean, it's such an incredible place to be for this. But when you signed that, and how would you compare that feeling compared to like the next one, and then compared to, like you said, it goes up and up and up? Is it always scary? How did that feeling change?
Every new lease can sink you, like if you really pick the wrong location, it could be enough that that failure in that area eliminates all your margins and then starts putting you into the red. And that's just enough. Then all sorts of other things happen after that. You can't afford to invest in this. You might have to cut your staff. There's like, it's kind of like the boulder starts tumbling down the hill that you were just pushing it up. And so there is always a risk, but part of it seems like, I'd say for us, we're always fueled, sorry for the pun, but we're always motivated by, we have a bold idea we want to chase after. And in this case now with our new location, we would be building it out in the full model of the new Field Collective, which, so there's this prototype location in Cincinnati that we've been running for about a year, and it is really more the new model we're heading towards. You walk in, and there's there's this beautiful reception desk with leather upholstery around the it's like a you feel like you walked into like a British social club maybe. There's like whole wall of antique books, there. So it's a very lush kind of colorful and textured setting. There's a bar over to the right, with like mirrored walls and all the drink, all the bottles stacked up. It looks very pretty. Mm-hmm. And that's the co-working commons. And that's where people hang out during the day. Mm-hmm. But then at 4:30 at night, the bartender comes on and starts slinging cocktails, and and you're running a social club as well. So it's kind of, and then there's a lot of, the space was designed so that you can actually have a lot of event and meeting and entertainment business selling to the outside, but it doesn't disrupt the people who are there as members. Cool. And that's been a problem, it's been kind of a challenge for us with our current spaces is like, yeah, we can have this big event, but it disrupts everybody who's there to work. And so you're kind of like, although you see the revenue potential and even have a need, you're at cross purposes, and space design is a big factor in that. So now we're designing spaces to allow us to play kind of both ends, selling to the outside, but also catering to the inside. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're looking, and we're excited about that, and we can see the potential. Cincinnati's been killing it in ways that we wish we could. So and with all the competition, we're going like, okay, just plain old co-working is becoming commoditized really fast, and it's not. I would say by itself, it's not a great business. It's a rent arbitrage scheme. You get a lease for a certain amount, and then you hope you can get your 20% on that. But when everybody else is there and some well-funded, well-heeled competitors are offering discounts, that becomes a very hard game to win at.
Yeah.
So you have to have another plan. So we're excited about the other plan and the space that lets us do that, but it's going to come at a high cost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if we don't do it, we're in trouble. So it's kind of like, I don't know. You're on the burning pier. What are you going to do? You're going to jump into this new thing,
Yeah, you're going to get in that water.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a big one. I've always wondered if the fear changes, because for me with doing video work, I've experienced this, like, start out with a little point and shoot. Then you get a Canon DSLR and you have work up to a certain level with that. And then all of a sudden there become everything beyond that. It starts adding zeros to the cost of the production, to the cost of the equipment, to the cost of what you're doing. And that continually it doesn't seem like it goes away. I don't know. Every time I'm kind of like, whoa, like this is the next thing, or this is the next push. And if you want to grow, if you want to continue building something that matters to you, it's like, I don't know. It feels like maybe this is just how it's going to be. It's just going to be a little scary every time, and it's going to be a little risky every time, and we're going to keep reinvesting in doing this. And I don't know. That's been my experience over the last several years. It's fascinating. Didn't expect
It's possible it doesn't go away, right? Because at some point, let's say the big risk isn't the equipment; it's now staff. You're going to hire somebody, and that first hire is like a nail biter. Because there's just all sorts of feelings that go around that. Sure, the second one is maybe easier, and the third one's easier. It becomes more of a, you're adding one piece to a larger thing. But now you have an abstract concept called payroll that scares you every 2 weeks. It's not any one person, but it's the accumulation of them all. And if you want to do this next thing, you might be having to actually staff up quite a bit. So I once talked to Mark Stutrud, who's the founder of Summit. Brewing, and the conversation was about, well, what do you think? How do you feel about all these newcomers? Like Surly, for instance. At that time, Surly was they were up in their Brooklyn Park location, but they were still making a lot of noise. And he was like, well, it's like, sure, they're getting a lot of attention, but we're at about like he described something like where, at each stage of that business, there's a new plateau you have to get to, and it has to do with brewing capacity in that case. So you've got, and they had a good sized brewery for a while in like Midway area, and then they jumped, and they had to take a big jump to their facility they have now over off of West 7th. But what it is you don't increase your capacity by 50%. You might increase it by 1,000%. Because you need to set yourself up for 10 years, not just the next 2. And so you're making a gigantic investment. You have to hope that you can sell into that, that all those, you're paying for so much equipment, and you have to hope that and so in addition to that, you're going to now spend way more on marketing and advertising than you did before, just so that you can keep those tanks full. So it's risky. And if that didn't work out, they'd be gone. They would have folded. So it is a bet the company, like every single time you try to get to the next plateau. Yeah, you are kind of betting everything. So that kind of just struck me. And the reason he brought that up, he said, sure, Surly will, or any other newcomer, they will have to play the same game we did. And he said, and it's not easy for everybody. Everybody has to get from one plateau to the next. So Surly couldn't overnight take over Summit's business. They couldn't. They'd have to go through that whole ratcheting up. So I don't know what the lesson of that is, except that I think this dynamic just exists in most businesses. If you want to kind of stay in it for any the time.
Yeah. I guess modern capitalism in a way. Like if there's a market segment where there's opportunity and there's arbitrage opportunity, as you called it, the market will evolve and move into that space until it opens up a new space, and then it evolves. And it's throughout the internet too. It's like on YouTube, I at one point I think was one of maybe 2 or 3 guys on YouTube talking about minimalism.
Really?
Yeah, it was a pretty open space, and now it's becoming something that is bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, I'm not saying, I was a pioneer of minimalism. No, there were people, men and women, blogging about it, doing podcasts, different things for years. When I was just figuring out, I was in my teens, just figuring out my life. And but in YouTube, there was that opening.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of early kind of attention, I think, because I was starting to talk about that. And it's weird because I was insecure about it. I was like,
in what way?
I was thinking, why am I one of the only guys on here talking about, especially my brand of minimalism, which is the practical, the remove distractions. But if it's not in the way, you're fine. You don't need to have 100 items, right? That brand, I was really one of the few people talking about it. And I felt insecure at the time. What's wrong here? There are all these other very, younger or very well put together women talking about this, and I'm an odd duck here, and it was very strange. And now I realized that was my opportunity. That's where the niche opened up for me to be talking about this stuff. And so what seemed like a comparison thing, which is something I'm going to ask you about in a second, what seemed like me comparing myself to people that I literally couldn't because they were of the opposite gender or they were, doing their own brand of this stuff, was actually the open marketplace for me to be talking about this and exploring a new place.
That's interesting. And you didn't see it at the time.
No. I felt like, man, they're making such beautiful videos. They're so much all better looking than me. Like I'm just, whatever. And YouTube is a face forward thing. And I always wondered, like, I wonder how that's affecting things. And I was never bitter about it. It's just, it only made me a little insecure about my potential or my future. And so looking back now, I can safely be like, well, there's nothing to be insecure about or worry about. You're just doing your own thing and you're creating this sort of space here.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what I wanted to ask about is what might you offer? Let's just say someone's starting out in entrepreneurship, they're creating something new. What would you offer in terms of advice around comparison?
Well, I think I've always been, only because I'm not much of a crowd follower. In fact, crowds really, I'm showing my Gen X stripes here. The minute something becomes kind of pervasive, then I don't want any part of it. Like I really have this my wife will tell me that like I'm just a snob, and that might be true at some level, but I'd like to think there's something else going on, that I just have an aversion to being in a herd. It just gives me the creeps, and I want to, I want to be thinking and writing and creating, or I just want to be kind of going somewhere else for some reason. And I guess the worst is like, the minute a band becomes popular, like suddenly you're like, no, I'm not into them anymore. But it's not that. It's more like I just don't want to be competing with a lot of other voices or a lot of, I just, because that's hard work. There's something instinctive for me that tells me that's a tough road to go and then try to slog it out with a bunch of other people being the same. Mm-hmm. So, does that mean just like, yeah, be different, be glad you're different? But that's a little too easy. So when I just had a conversation with a young fellow who is starting a clothing company that has a particular take on it. And we were talking about, he was out of St. Thomas. So, in his case, anybody coming out of St. Thomas in entrepreneurship is looking at the Love Your Melon people, because that thing just went nuts. And the conversation was about like, well, it's when you're younger there's a certain stage in which it's easier to be a disruptor because you're somehow tapped into the zeitgeist, you just have this sense of like, in his case, if it's fashion and it's youth culture, he's able to like, he's in it. He's breathing it. He's super tapped in. Well, that becomes a little bit harder because give him 10 years with that thing and a modicum of success, and suddenly he's spending a lot more time thinking about things like, we have to find a cheaper manufacturer for this, or these zippers aren't available. Crap, what do we do? Or I'm having staff troubles. The person who's running the shipping department has been, I don't know, groping the staff. Now I have a harassment issue. Like you have all those other things that are occupying your time. You don't have as much time to just sit there and filter feed the culture and to stay in tune. Now occasionally you'll see people who just have a genius for never losing their grip on that, and that's a real gift. But so I was just thinking about like, so when you're younger, not exclusively, but kind of when you have nothing to lose, then you're in a good position to basically be yourself, and because what's the worst that happens? Nobody pays attention or nobody follows, but you haven't lost anything. Mm-hmm. It's as you go along further, you have more sunk costs and you have more. It seems like you have more at stake, including what this thing that you might call your reputation or your brand that you think you've developed. I'm cautious about giving advice to younger people because I think like, being older myself, I feel like I'm concerned with different matters now, and also being in kind of the more mature state of a business. I'm thinking about different things. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess the best it would be easier for me to answer that question if maybe in 6 months my business shows me the door and says, hey, we don't need you anymore, get out of here. And then suddenly I'm on the street and I'm going like, well, okay, what do I do? And who am I? And how is that relevant to what's going on in the world? And what if I say like, okay, I'm gonna do what Anthony does, and I'm gonna start, podcasting or vidcasting or something like that. Well, then I'm facing that question.
It is fascinating. The idea of standing out, like you were kind of mentioning, the just the concept of I don't want to be in a crowded room. Like I want to be able to be in a space where you can flourish, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But it is fascinating. I always wanted to blend in. Growing up in school, I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be a part of the group. I wanted to be just in the community. Didn't want to stand out. As soon as I got older and I started applying to colleges, to jobs, starting things that required attention, people's attention to start, all I wanted was to stand out for once. And that transition of realizing like, I've spent so much of my life just wanting to fit in, to just blend in and not stand out of this group. That was a lot of effort that went into training my brain to just want to be accepted, be there, instead of literally like doing the things that often made me a little goofy, a little strange maybe, but were things I was interested in and would just now make me stand out. A lot of the things I do now, taking a lighter approach to this personal development stuff, like it can be so serious, but taking a lighter, goofy approach to it, because we all need to kind of let go of a little bit of this and laugh at ourselves and be willing to get into this. And maybe that's what helps me stand out now, but it's not that but is it going to make people question my reputation? Like, will I be taken seriously as someone who cares about habits and, these things? I don't know, but it's just that shift has been such a huge one, realizing that we're taught basically in school to just fit in, like find your stuff.
Absolutely.
Like,
we're taught to be good little capitalist, enablers, right? I mean, because what's our job? And this is well, let's not get on this pet peeve, but what's our job, right? To produce. And so we measure everything on how much we produce. We measure. Basically going to high school and college is kind of like just demonstrating that you know how to fit in and follow instructions. So toward what end, right? So you can be accepted by some employer who will give you a job. And it's just kind of like on and on and on. So yeah, standing out is like not economically healthy for most people in most of their situations. But suddenly you're trying to garner attention from out in the wild. Yeah, it's standing out. But at what cost, right? Do you want to stand out? Do you want to stand out for being yourself, or for being some persona that's not yourself? Acting aside, I mean, there's some people who are really good at creating personas and characters and playing them, and they're very well aware that that's a character, and then they step away from the camera or the microphone, and they are different, a largely different person. The persona comes from somewhere inside them, but they're clear that it's not them. But I'd say in this endeavor, of like your podcasting, you're bringing yourself to this game, like, and like, and the real Anthony's like some kind of, crazy drug-addled kind of dude, but you're a centered, stable human being, and you seek a certain kind of centeredness, and I think you're advocating for centeredness and all that stuff. So it makes sense that you wouldn't act outside that central drive of yours, that you're who you are as a human. So getting attention, in some ways, you go, well, that's kind of at cross purposes, or that's like not true to who you even are. You're not just like you're not going to do something gimmicky, right? So instead, getting attention might mean like actually getting more vulnerable and saying things that you are loath to admit, but now you're going to do it in front of thousands of people.
Yep.
But why? Because it actually deepens the authenticity and draws people and draws more people, And I think we know some folks in town, like I think like Nora Permort, who like is, she's super vulnerable, and it's drawn a lot of people to her. Like folks are eating that up, It's kind of like vulnerability plus craft, You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to turn it from just being self-confession into something that other people can take and run with and be constructive with.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, the thing about standing out. Who knows? Maybe I will be facing this down, in the next year or two. I'd be lucky if somehow we had some kind of successful exit, but odds are we'll be working hard. So I will not be on the street anytime soon. But something in me craves that in the near future. I want to actually kind of set out and create a new chapter. And I'm not sure exactly what form that'll take, but I'm kind of looking forward to that pit in your stomach kind of nervousness about, okay, now it's just me, and do I have anything to say that anybody cares about? And is it something that's true to me, or am I just kind of playing into some narrative that I think the world will accept about me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I spent the last 9 years saying, writing and saying and speaking, and we did some podcasting for a while about small businesses and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and all that kind of stuff. And I do have a super strong soft spot for people who are, kind of out there hustling. But I would have to give serious thought as to whether that's really what I would want to make my calling card or my topic that I want to camp around in the future. Like, I should at least ask the question, is that really, do you want to do that the rest of your life? Do you want to talk about that the rest of your life? Or are there some other more important things?
Well, speaking about important things, you mentioned to me previously about focusing on the important things and honing in your information diet as it's come to be known.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what does an information diet look like for you, and what purpose do you feel like it's serving you?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, right now it's not a great diet. Like, I waste too much time looking at things that I don't think are super productive. I don't want to be puritanical about this either, because I don't. It's just like I don't take much pleasure in like actual dietary asceticism. And I had my Peruvian aunt, and those who might listen to this podcast who were around this summer and might have run into this aunt. She's my tia Chauca, and she's taught me a lot about life, mostly from me visiting her for month-long visits to Lima, Peru, and I would just sit in the kitchen and help her cook, or she'd just talk while she cooked, or I would ride shotgun in her car when she went and ran errands all around the city, and she would comment on anything we passed, or I got such a great lesson in kind of how a Peruvian thinks about stuff. And one of the things she said to me, because I was there one trip and I was concerned about cholesterol. So I was like, no, Tia, I can't have that. I can't eat that because it has cholesterol. She goes, oh, cholesterol. She says, here's the problem with you Americans. She said, it's your puritanical background that the way you deal with problems is you use prohibition. You say nope, I can't have I have to shun the evil thing. I have to remove it from my life. So what do you want to prohibit these days? Is it gluten? Is it fat? At one time it was cholesterol. Now it's carbs. And so we almost culturally as Americans, I think we tend to kind of try to cut out whole categories of things. And then we wonder why it's not sustainable, Well, of course it's not, because it's not a mix. I think we crave variety. And the minute we try to get rid of variety, it just doesn't set us up for success. So all that, a little side rant on the concept of a diet. But I would say if I looked at mine right now, I probably have too much junk food in there, which would probably be similar to my actual diet. But I do have some cravings that I'm trying to spend some time indulging in, and I also have some prohibitions, but they're kind of for a good reason right now. Like one of the things I don't want to have in my info diet, which I'll just give you. Okay, so what is it? It's I probably spend too much time looking at Twitter, which is like a thief of joy, because it's like where you find out what everybody else thinks, and then I don't know. It just seems like, or you try to make little witty comments on things, and I don't know if that's in the end really terribly helpful. I do have some subreddits that I follow, and I like Reddit in a general sense because I have been able to discover some really interesting things that I wasn't aware of. But there's also just a crap load of, there's just so much junk in there. So we were talking about the idea of excluding some things, and so despite my previous rant about not being too puritanical, there's just some things I'm having almost an intuitive aversion to. And if I look at what that is and I summarize it, there's a type of success porn that's really driving me crazy, and I see as being kind of damaging. And it's really like these success stories as they get written up in the business press, kind of adoring pieces about startup founders and the 5 things they do, before breakfast every day, and this is nothing new. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I hated men's magazines because they were all about like personal success, and it was always recipe driven and like lists of things that you aren't doing and that you should be. And as I got older, I realized it was all bullshit. I mean, like, it was really like, no, shave however the hell you want to shave. There is no secret to shaving, and if you're not doing it, you're not damaging your skin for life. If you don't feel like using shaving cream, just take a dry razor and go do it. Who cares? Like, none of this stuff matters. But yeah, I think. And now, as an old guy, I look back and I go, yeah, a lot of people in their 20s and into their 30s are so concerned with how should I be doing things and how are others doing things. And now I look back and I go, like, doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Just do things the way you want to do them, But so in the business world, you get the same thing, Like, everybody's concerned about, like, so-and-so's rules for success. I'm like, screw so-and-so. Like, find your own path. Find your own way, make your own mistakes. And don't be so worried about recipes, because there aren't any. There really aren't. I mean, lightning strikes. I think a lot of successes, there's a lot of people who are working very hard and very disciplined, who have not achieved any material success. And so what are they? Did they get one of the ingredients wrong in the recipe? No, lightning just didn't happen to strike them. There's so much randomness in success. There's also a lot of pre-gaming that happens with people's, what would you say, what Warren Buffett calls the genetic lottery.
Yeah.
Who you're born to.
Womb lottery or something.
Yeah, who you're born to and kind of what household you grew up in. So I'm really done with all this comparison and fawning over people who have been successful in what has been really lottery conditions in many cases. And so likewise, I'm done with business books. I have friends who read them and recommend them, and I want nothing to do with them because it's the same thing. It's formulas. And I'm more interested in like finding. One is coming up with my own definition of success and like what makes us valuable as human beings, and it should not be our productive output as measured by revenue or how much we sold a company for, that kind of stuff. Some of the most amazing people on earth are, for me, some of the people I value the most are destitute. Like, they are not super successful. They experience, difficult times financially, and that has no bearing on the value of their person, their ideas, what it means to spend a couple hours in their company. So how about that stuff, right? Can we talk about that? That's a different kind of success porn. But like, so I'm really this has got to be cranky old man syndrome. I'm pretty sure, because I'm a couple of years past the big 50, and 50 I didn't care. I tried to ignore it, but now I've had time to think about it, and I'm really I'm finding myself way more interested in kind of quality of life as measured not by physical stuff, but like the richness of your relationships, the richness of your thoughts, the richness of your time as you get to spend it. So one of the things I've done, I've taken up a hobby, which and I tell more people about it now, which is really funny. I don't know why, but I make a point of telling people that I build model tanks in my spare time, and part of it is like because it's a folly. In the sense of like it's a useless thing. It's a really pointless thing. It's mostly just a thing you get to do with your hands, and while maybe I'll listen to podcasts or radio or music, but it also has its own little like there's things you can do if you want to kind of have more fun with it. You can research the thing that you're building, and try to find pictures and go like, oh, so that's where that one thing goes. You can try to do more to make it realistic, like with like painting and weathering. And so like somebody look at it goes, oh wow, if you look up close, you're like, that really looks like it actually has, I don't know, like been through the mud, or it's clearly like it's dusty, like it's in the desert. Anyway, so this kind of appeals to the historian side of me. I'm a big fan of history. So as opposed to advice books, I really like history books, because in there is not there may be advice, but there's all sorts. You have to earn it. You have to interpret a lot of things. So this kind of appeals to that historical interest I have, and also it's just really, again, it's purposelessness is kind of something that I like. Because I cannot tell you how my building, World War II Italian tanks that were in Tunisia, building models of those, it has zero value to the world, but yet it's something that is bringing me a lot of enjoyment.
Why?
I don't know.
Some of the things I found a correlation, and it's often the things that people say in response to that. They'll say, wow, you have too much time on your hands. That are the things that, like you were saying, may seem purposeless, that can provide some of the deepest flow, the deepest satisfaction, the deepest just having a thing that you do because you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Why are we so hard on ourselves that we don't get to do things we like?
Right.
I mean, that's like, if you think about it, this is just like everybody is like mainlining the Protestant work ethic, that like you are only as valuable as what you produce. And so therefore, you're not allowed to have too much time in your hands. You're not allowed to, it's a bad thing to indulge in some kind of like personal fascination that brings nothing to the world, as far as we know. Now here's the interesting part. So one of my strengths, if I do the Strengths Finder, is input. And input means that like you find all information or all kind of input valuable. And someone with that strength tends to also be they could possibly be a collector. Now, collections, it would seem like it is not a good friend of the minimalist movement, or vice versa. But yet, collections are basically like, I want to be surrounded by all these things that kind of give me, like stimulation. And the information side, it's like, I don't judge any information as being bad. In other words, I'll read this thing and I'll read that thing, and like I want all that input, because I don't know, and especially as a writer, I'm like, I almost take it as a challenge to find some like obscure and arcane fact that I gained from reading some goofy book, that's already out of print, and then work it into my writing. Like it's like a personal challenge, because part of it is like, and I have as like a business owner, I've been surprised how often something that seemed like it was really arcane and arbitrary and not super relevant became relevant later. I was able to draw on that thing that I read with, so my reading is not defined by the utility of the subject matter, and that's one reason why the business books bother me, because they're really trying to like just, that you should only be reading about things that contribute to your success and your productivity in the world. And I'm like, no, how about like, let's read about, histories of people who have existed or other arcane subjects, because they could actually be as valuable as some book on like the, I don't know, the 7 habits of effective, leaders or something like that. Do you know that website, Atlas Obscura?
Yeah.
They started out as like really like that was my jam when they started out, before they kind of had to turn it into a content generator. But they still, to this day, have some interesting stuff, like where, you could read about like really bizarre little things, in some corner of Italy or something. I find a lot of value in that. And it's almost because none of it has any application in capitalist endeavors. And why does that matter? Because it reminds me that our value as humans is not related, and the value of our experience is not related to how much we can generate in terms of profits or productivity. It's like sometimes an amazing view is an amazing view, or a really good piece of bread is a really good piece of bread,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I don't want to judge it on all these external terms that have been handed to us.
Having those things, I think, is really important. Having those things that we explore, just the explore because you want to. I mean, that's
Right.
really it. Like, just
Trust yourself that your brain is an exquisite tool, and if it wants to research, you know, I mean, I once met a woman. She was a PhD graduate at the U, and she studied, you know, microbiology, and her favorite thing in the world to talk about was herpes. She was fascinated by but as a microorganism, she was like, it's the most successful, you know, it's like the most successful bacterium in the world or whatever. It was really interesting. You know, she was so turned on by this field of study because for her, it was like endless. It was endless, like things to explore. Now, who knows what she could uncover? Maybe in the end, there will be a lot of utility in that. But in the meantime, she could go 20 years and really make no contributions, you know, to the field. But who knows, right? That's why it's like I just don't think you can judge it or prejudge it. You just kind of got to let people go.
let them do their thing.
Yeah, which then applies to us, you know. So like, don't be so hard on yourself. Indulge some things that seem impractical, because they may be leading you somewhere else. That might not be the thing, but there might be the next thing it leads to, or the thing after that, and then all of a sudden you're in some really rich territory.
Yeah.
You know, so can we have a little faith in ourselves and how the human mind works and indulge that side?
There's so much to learn from things that are not designed to be learned. I mean,
Yeah,
part of
not
what you're
designed to be instructive.
instructive. Yes, thank you. That's perfect. Like a big part of what you're talking about right now is why Amy and I decided to start this podcast, because there's only so much you can say. You can try to be concise. You can try to create value, make it beautiful in a 3 to 5 minute video on YouTube. That is the kind of a standard for what type of content is on YouTube.
Yeah.
But again, it's like some of it starts to feel a little bit like a Cosmopolitan cover or a Men's Health magazine cover or an Entrepreneur magazine cover, where it's like, here are the 5 ways that this happened for me. And it's like, yes, there are 5 things that I've sort of changed that have really helped me over the last 6 months in terms of getting healthier, doing this stuff. But there's also just there's so much deeper context to that, because, well, I was feeling better about myself because this happened. And so this is what allowed me to eat salads for breakfast every day. And
Yeah.
so like, yes, it was the salad, but like, what was it that, right? And so these deeper conversations are really what I wanted to get into and start exploring, because you can't say everything in 4 minutes. You need an hour sometimes.
Yeah, because it's reductionist. We're trying to reduce complex things down to essences, and there's fidelity lost, right? It's like compressing sound files. There's information lost when you compress. So like to share music, we might use a compression format, you know, and give you an MP3. But when we're creating and when we're playing and experiencing, we're doing it in full fidelity.
I used to buy Entrepreneur magazine whenever I would be at the airport, just to have something to read. So I'd always pick up that magazine. I think I had a subscription at one point, so I get it every month. And I do just remember how it does not make you, like, it feels fun to read, and it's fun to maybe be seen reading it. Maybe this is a vulnerable moment for me. Like, I was maybe buying it to be seen reading it at the airport on the plane. So it started an interesting conversation, because I hadn't started shit at that point. I hadn't. But these stories, the cover stories of people that were younger than I was at the time, you know, getting millions in funding or having the new thing idea, and you get deeper, you get older, and I look at this and I'm like, man, there's so much more to that story. For every one of these, there's 1,000 of the people that it's just not working out, but like of people that are making impacts, that are doing meaningful work, but aren't getting millions in funding and on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine doing it. Like, there's so much more out there, and having that it's like flipping through any old magazine, you know, it's you're just highlighting these few stories that make it feel like that's all there is.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I guess it's really like fashion mags, you know, it's creating a sense of need and you know, and want, that comes out of, and it's playing into any, our maybe our natural senses of inadequacy. Like you're not good enough, you don't know enough, you're not ready. So, but these people are. Maybe it's easier when you get older to just go like, I don't have the energy for it. I just don't even have like the aptitude or the energy to like go and play into that. So maybe is there a way to advocate for putting that stuff, kind of like just say no, put it away, release it, like just don't pay it too much heed. Sure, if you can pick up a few good tidbits from a business book or or like what would be like. Well, I suppose Fast Company is like is always classic. They never revisit any of the, like they always have those sunny articles, and they never go back and talk about like, those people we covered 2 years ago, they're all dead now.
Like it's their company blew up, and
they never tell you the full story, so you just think it's like endless succession of people being more successful than you, by those standards of success, and never realizing that most of us are somewhere in the middle, and we all kind of we're all deeply flawed people dealing with insecurities and all that stuff, and now maybe that doesn't make good reading either, I don't know. But it'd be nice to help people let themselves off the hook a little bit, and just go like, you know what, it's a struggle, it's gonna be, and that's really okay. We're all doing okay, and let's not get so hung up on what everybody else is doing. And if you have some crazy itch, go scratch it.
So this is a question that comes up. We do for every interview. What does creativity mean or look like to you?
Being creative is following and is indulging in following things that occur to you as interesting or exciting or just something that you feel compelled to look into, but also like not being put off by what you've been told is the value of that thing. Like one of my little, I like to cook, and one of my little obsessions in the category of cooking is spices. I love going to like the Indian market and buying like a whole pound of cumin seeds, and then I grind them up, or then I mix them with other spices and roast them and make garam masala and stuff like that. Now that seems like a little too much. And there's times when my wife will be like, like the whole house stinks, like whatever, because I'm roasting chilies or something like that. But I get so much out of it, and I've discovered there's things, stories, and there's interesting aspects of all those elements that come into cooking, and I get more out of it, and it has no purpose beyond that. It's a creative, but that's part of a creative process of cooking. Is like, if you kind of want to amp it up in some area, go ahead, try it. So there's something. So creativity for me, I guess, is self-indulgent in the good way, and it's following things. It's following urges that occur to you as being worthy, but regardless of what other people might say or what society says.
Love it.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What would you say, like in this whole process, you've been interviewing people, and I like the fact that the people you interview are, you don't have them on because they're titans of this or that. Like you're bringing in people who are up for, some hearty conversations about real stuff. What's been the biggest realization for you after having done all this?
Yeah.
Because there's just something you're like, wow, I've discovered a truth that I didn't know was out there.
I can name a few.
Okay.
That's a great question. And I don't know that I've gotten a lot of questions on this podcast for me personally yet. So I appreciate that. First is that interviewing people is an incredibly difficult skill. Some people are naturally good at it. I am not. And so very early on, in the very first episode of season 1, I was completely thrown off in understanding just how hard it was to sit down and have a directed conversation. I've been talking to people my whole life, and it's very, very different. And so what you're hearing and seeing now for anyone viewing and listening is a very different version of me learning to like slow down a little bit, like take a couple notes, think about where we want to go with things. And so that was one of my learnings. 2, everyone is a person in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. whether they have something massive, they're making an amount of money with a lot of zeros behind it, or just a couple.
Yeah.
Everyone is a person in progress. And we hit on this a little bit in that it still feels hard. There's this quote that's a little cheesy, but I keep seeing it, and I think it's really true, is that we don't try to grow so that we can have an easy life. It's so that we can take on bigger and bigger challenges with ease. Maybe not even with ease, but that we can toughen ourselves to the challenges of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a theme that I keep seeing in guests through personal growth, through the things they're working on, whether it be nutrition, talking about moderation and nutrition and looking at the balance of how.
I noticed you didn't invite me to that podcast, so that's probably a good thing. Yeah.
It's all these things are more and more and more. I'm finding that balance is the answer to so many of life's questions from my guests.
How about acceptance?
Acceptance,
yeah,
self-acceptance,
right,
and then third, probably the people that I feel this energy from is the true sense of knowing thyself. That what helps people get to a place where they're comfortable with themselves, where they know what they need to do and how they interact with the world, are the people that deeply know themselves.
Yeah.
Their shortcomings, their strengths, the things that they can do well and cannot do well, which is just another way to say shortcomings and strengths. But those are the things that I felt like have been my deepest learnings of, like, knowing yourself is one of the strongest things you can do.
Yeah, and I think it's really okay if you aren't there yet, because I think that's one of the gifts of age, is that you've come to accept kind of what your OS is, and it turns out it's very different than other people's. You know what I mean? Like, you just and even like a long time in a marriage, for instance, will teach you that, like, you're not going to change the other person. Like, there is some set ways that we all have. And so when you're younger and you don't know that yet, you do try to fake it sometimes and, like, take on roles that you're really not well suited for. Like, I've had jobs in the past where I was actually managing details about things. And anybody who knows me would say, like, that's the worst thing you could have this guy do.
Yeah.
Because he does not manage details for shit. And now I have the impatience to like, if somebody suggested I should do something like that, I'd be, nope, I'm not your guy. I will hate it. You will hate the results. And I can say it in a heartbeat. When I was younger, I would be like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'll take that. I'd be good at that. And I applied for jobs that, like, I was so unqualified for because I didn't know who I was. So anyways, it's great. It's awesome that, like, as you get older, you just don't even have the patience to try or to fake it. And you're just like, you're willing to call yourself out, and your shortcomings, like, in a heartbeat, because it's so much easier to play to your strengths than to try to make up for your deficiencies, And that's one thing, like, with we had some members at Coco years ago who were strengths finder coaches, and their whole thing was like, yeah, traditional management is, like, to get everybody to equalize, like, to not do too much with their strengths, but to try to fill in all their weaknesses. Well, that just makes you equally unhappy across the board, And so the other way is to go, like, no, let's not make you fake it or phone it in on your weaknesses and trying to bolster those. Let's just play to your strengths and be done with it. I'm like, yes, that sounds perfect.
My whole life, I've tried to focus on shortcomings, on the things I'm not good at, and trying to figure out how to bring those up to speed. And I do believe in an element of balance with this stuff, of well-roundedness, that you gotta. There's an element of, like, you gotta bring some of the things up to a certain level.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, we do. There's so much opportunity in focusing on our strengths, knowing who we are, what we do, and what we don't do well. I mean, I'm in the same boat. The details down here, my head's up here, and I'm right here right now.
Right.
Like, I'm nowhere else. I'm just right here. And so that is great for a lot of reasons and terrible for a lot of reasons. And I can rely heavily on the great ones most of the time that allow me to be here, be present, just be worried about this moment, not what's going to happen a month from now, that make it work. And,
Yeah.
but there's always growth. There's always opportunities to continue growing and figuring out how to balance this stuff out.
Yeah, and there's some humility too that helps. Like I'm reminded, in my home life that there's a bunch of things that I don't do well, and that doesn't, and I know that they're not my strengths. It doesn't mean that I get to ignore them completely and just be a jerk, and be like, yeah, well, I don't like doing the dishes, so I'm not going to do them. Like, you don't get to do that. So there's stuff to work on, because you just need to be a decent human being to your loved ones, and the people around you. So yeah, it's like there's some things that you fill in because you need to get along with other people, but don't take on something that's just so antithetical. And maybe this is more in your kind of career pursuits, to take on something that's antithetical to your being. Like you're saying, you love big ideas, and so you're working with big ideas. That's a winning combination. I'm not going to ask you to do my accounting.
Yeah.
Anytime soon.
You don't want to.
Yeah, and you should say no, right?
There shouldn't be well, when you get into creative accounting, that's when you get into trouble.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And you don't want a creative person, unless you're trying to hide something. You don't want a creative person doing your taxes. So that's great. Well, let's grab
the magical question.
Yeah.
All right, here it is.
And these are questions that have been submitted by previous guests. We'll have you leave a question as well.
Really?
Pull one that looks good to you, and if you don't mind reading it,
yeah, sure,
so that we can hear it.
Okay, so this one is: do you have any scars? And if so, what's the story behind them? If not, what's the worst you have been injured?
Who?
Do you want? Should I say who?
Yeah, you could say who.
Did you read it? Matt Bray.
Oh, so that was another guest. So Matt is a YouTuber. He's a younger guy, and he is the guy that does the dance videos.
Oh yeah.
So I'm fascinated by that question, because he was very excited to leave that question, but I didn't know what it was.
Wow, that's great. Well, I could go back. There's two things I would consider scars for me, that probably explain some of my drives. And of course, since everything, there's two sides to every coin. So a lot of your motivations or your drives are also on the flip side. You're running towards something, you may also be running from something. So when I was in middle school, grade school, I don't remember so much, but middle school, I was kind of like the picked on kid, because I was just, I was not looking great at that time. I mean, like, as far as, I was not, I wouldn't say I was an attractive kid. And I probably didn't dress the part. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so I wasn't really like, I didn't have a great wardrobe to pick from. I think I had a tracksuit my mom made for me, some sweaters she knit for me. So, so I just was not a popular kid. But even further, I seemed to, there's something about me seemed to almost like, invite ridicule. So I think that was a scar for me. And I think later on in high school, I was involved at a summer camp where I just met a whole bunch of people who didn't have any historical background with me. And I was popular there, which was really kind of like a refreshing change. A whole bunch of people thought I was the shiz. And then that seemed to set me up. Like I think I gained a lot of confidence through that. And by the time I got to college, I was doing pretty good. But I think what that really reinforced in me is a desire to be liked, which can be fine. That can be a great motivator for doing lots of things. But also on the other hand too, then it can warp you, because you're always trying to be liked, and you don't have as much of a backbone as you need in some situations. So I think that was one thing. The other one, which kind of comes from a similar place, is like I said, my parents didn't have a lot of money. My dad was laid off. He worked for U.S. Steel selling structural I-beams to Latin America. Great job until he got laid off, and when the steel industry had a big slump, and I think there was like an economic recession. So from that point forward, he was always kind of chronically underemployed. And it was a source of embarrassment for me when I was a kid, because I didn't, how kids don't understand. This is the thing. Kids don't understand that their parents are humans until they themselves are probably into their 30s, or at least late. But while they have teen brain, they're very self-centered, and they don't realize that their parents are humans who struggle. And I don't think I realized that about my dad until much later. And then after he died, I mean, I definitely, his memory was gilded, but I gained a lot of sympathy for how he, what he went through in trying to keep the family afloat. But for me, as I was experiencing it, in high school, was like I had 2 shirts that I liked, and if I wanted to get more, my dad would be like, "No, there's no income, there's no outgo," and my mom would like slip me, a little bill on the side, "Here, go get something," But so my relationship with money and scarcity and what it felt like poverty to me, but that's all relative. But my relationship with money was, I've actually been overly self-indulgent with money. In other words, not really taking good care of like my financial health, because that would be scarcity, and I don't want to live in scarcity, because I tried that and it was not a lot of fun, and it had a lot, and and at that young impressionable age, that scarcity, kind of got wrapped up in my identity, and so I think I've been, running from that ever since. So that was great. That's made me very ambitious entrepreneurially, but it still hasn't, I still haven't really learned. I'm now dependent on a wife who's like a heck of a money manager. And it feels great that she's taking care of that, because I get too much anxiety around it. Now, should I cure that someday? I don't know. Maybe before I die, maybe I'll need to. But for now, I'm kind of like, I'm happy that I have somebody else who's really, giving me security in that area of like watching over those things.
Yeah.
But I've done a lot of dumb things, and until then. So, all right. So what was that? Do I have any scars? Yeah. So popularity and relative poverty.
Yeah. Yep. That was a great answer. And
good question.
Personal one. That was a good question. Man, I'm impressed.
Does this go back into the bin?
No, it stays out now. It's burned.
Oh, wow.
Burned.
Well, I hope it was worthy. The answer was worthy of the question.
That's great. I had a different childhood experience, but a similar outcome with money. It's weird how I let go of it freely. I give it freely. I don't know. I have a weird relationship with it. I think it's part of the Break the Twitch story for me of just $20. Okay, whatever. It's just $20, $30, whatever. It's just I didn't want it to let it be something that controlled me, or
that owned you.
Yeah. That sort of it led to a similar thing, and I'm lucky that in a lot of ways Amy is more conservative, financially, and is helped provide the bumper rails on the bowling alley. You know, to even that out. But and then my work here is a lot of my own personal growth stuff with learning about like, why am I like how I am? It's interesting diving into this stuff and having conversations with friends who are other entrepreneurs that have an incredible drive to entrepreneurship and making high amounts of money, and then learning about narrative of this stuff. It's fascinating.
Learning the well, it's interesting. We had a big, with my previous business, which kind of it was like a slow motion failure. So we ultimately dissolved that. It ran like 10 years, and we ultimately dissolved it. But there were some stretches where like we were so strapped, and I remember that me and my 2 partners were staring at bankruptcy. And what the reason was because if we had all these obligations with the business, and it turns out there were obligations we shouldn't have ever taken on, like a rent and phone systems, and then the server, and then the T1 line, all that stuff that you had to have if you had the phone system, and so we had all these obligations. And if one of the partners pulled out and said, "I can't do this," then it would be a domino effect, because none of us would, the debt and the obligation would go to the next 2 partners. And then if one of them fails, basically either all 3 of us stayed in or we all failed at once. And we decided to stick it out. But what that meant then was a whole bunch of years of recovering from that. And so it was, even through an economic boom time, we were still strapped. And I remember my ex-wife, she at that time was working with a lot of Karen families who were here from, the Karen is an ethnic group in Burma, but they've been driven out of the country, a lot of them by the Burmese army, and they ended up in camps in Thailand and got sponsored. And now we have one of the biggest Karen populations in the United States here in Minnesota. And a lot of them were, they came over here and they had personal stories that were like something out of the Holocaust, really terrible stuff. I mean, just extreme personal violence that people have witnessed done to their families, and deprivation and horrible stuff. But what was interesting, my ex would say that the reason she loved those families, and to this day, that's her favorite group to work with, because she said they don't seem to harbor any resentment. Like she says, I haven't met one who says like, yeah, I want to go back and kill the Burmese. When we like couldn't make our mortgage and our credit rating started getting tanked and all sorts of stuff, she'd be like, you know what, we're fine. We don't have the Burmese army chasing us through the jungle trying to kill us at night. She says, we're good. I remember once there was a time I was going to see a client and for my other business, and I didn't have any money in the bank to pay the parking ramp fee. Sure, I had a client. We were going to charge him $150 an hour, as a business. But at that moment in my personal bank account, despite I'm going to get this business, and eventually we will bill for that, and maybe some of that will trickle down to me, but I couldn't even get out of the parking ramp. So I had to call her and go, what do I do? And she's like, okay, I think I can like slither some money over into this account and then you can get out. It was just one of those things. And it was, and I remember thinking like, I'm smart. I know I'm smart. I know I'm skilled at what I do, but yet this is happening to me and I can't figure out why. It was like the dysmorphia or whatever you would call it, or like the cognitive dissonance between like, I'm a clever person and I'm smart and I have a lot to contribute, but yet it's not equating to like I have this other situation with my finances that tells me I'm an idiot and I'm like failing, and reckoning the two is really hard. I probably did it for 5 years straight of trying to like balance that. But her words were really helpful. Like that helped for me to go like, you know what, it could be so much worse. So like just, get through it. Yeah. Get through it because how lucky are we that like we get to talk about this stuff, and so I don't want to be like the, be grateful because there's starving kids in Africa kind of thing, that old stuff that people would say when I was growing up. But yet a certain amount of like gratitude and humility is okay. And yeah, you may be brilliant and you may have a really brilliant idea or something like that. And you may also be poor right now. That's a big thing to kind of grapple with.
Yeah. To have a model that works, to have something that's a seemingly good idea, but to have it not be in a place that can actually allow you to continue doing it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing.
So I don't know if that's if that points to the need for perseverance, or like to really cultivate that in yourself, or to find other people who also struggle, but yet in spite of, being talented or whatever. I mean? Like I think during that time I actually found a lot of solace in hanging out with people who were also, for whatever reason, on the margins, because it just reminded me that like. Well, because what the opposite would be if I'm sitting here struggling and then I go hang out with people who are materially successful, well, that's going to drive me crazy. I'll be like, well, what's wrong with me? Why are they so good at this?
There's an interesting balance to that. I found that I'm energized by other people that are doing a thing. I was thrown into a situation at one point with 9 other guys that were all successful bloggers and internet entrepreneurs. Like successful. Yeah. And I had just started Break the Twitch basically. And being in that environment made me feel a lot of things.
Yeah.
But one of the things was of course I can do this. Like all these guys are doing it. 90% of the people here are doing it successfully. I am the 10% that hasn't yet. So of course it's possible.
Yeah.
Everyone in this room is doing it. When you step out back into the normal world, then you realize that this is a group of people that have worked hard to make this thing happen and have done it well through some luck and hard work and all this other stuff. Yeah. But then there's the other side of like, well, what am I doing wrong? If I'm the one in this room that's not there yet, what haven't I done right yet? And so there's all kinds of stuff to feel around.
Well, maybe there's definitely a balance here, and maybe that's one reason why. Like I eschew the success porn because it's all that survivor bias, It's sure if I take the peak of the iceberg, all these people who've been successful, and all I tell you about is like their successes, what you don't read about is all, you don't learn about all the struggles and the side steps and the, whereas if you read a history, if you read like, about people in the past who've done things, you might get more of the fiber and not just the sugar, like you'd find out that like, oh yeah, actually most of these overnight successes took 20 years and people had some serious setbacks or whatever. It's a little more balanced view. And you realize that like, if you're struggling, you're not alone. Yeah. You're in the greatest company.
You're in great company.
Right. And I think that I take some solace in that, because otherwise I'm like, oh great, this is never going to work, and that's defeating.
Yeah. There have to be some examples of it working, maybe to be able to be like, I'm not crazy here.
Yeah, it's possible to pull something off, but also understand that like a lot of what you read about are hard work plus good luck stories. Yeah. You've got the hard work part, but you might not have the good luck. Mm-hmm. The random meeting of so and so that suddenly changed your life. Well, what can you learn from that? Mm-hmm. Be in places where you can have random meetings with successful or with generous benefactors. I mean, right. So there's not much instructive, I think, about a lot of success stories.
Yeah. I mean, I can point to those even with where Break the Twitch is.
Yeah.
As a blog, as a YouTube channel, things like that. I can point to specific people that I met. Joshua Becker of the blog Becoming Minimalist. Met him early on. He was super encouraging, kind, generous, and helped me. When I launched my blog and installed Google Analytics, I have never gotten less than 50 people a day from the day I installed analytics. And it was pretty soon after actually starting the blog. Now, I had started blogs in the past where I get 0 for a long time. But the fact that Joshua had happened to share one of my early articles, I figured a couple weeks in, I should probably install analytics, get a sense of where it's going. And I've never had less than 50 a day from the very first day. And that was 4 years ago. And that, I know that a lot of the success that we've seen here of the reach of the wonderful people we've been able to interview and do all these things have started because I got lucky and met a wonderful dude that seemed to think I had something to share. And so he helped me share it. And so yeah, it's never just pull your bootstraps up.
Yeah. And you know what I heard in that story was like, how cool would it be to be a guy like Joshua Becker and be like, you get to go and spread good luck. Like you could choose to be the person who goes around and like, what a privilege that would be. Like if you could use your position to go and like give other people that little touch that gets them going. Like that's kind of neat.
Isn't it?
Yeah, maybe boy.
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe that's my recipe for my next 50 years.
Well, I mean, I could even just point out the fact that there are successful companies that started as nothing in your spaces, in the environment that you helped create, that have grown over the years, and some eventually move on and buy office buildings that are big and whatever. That's kind of the natural progression of just being a huge company eventually. But I would say in a lot of ways you have done that, and you very much have been doing that.
I mean, I feel lucky that there are some instances of people who like met, at the coffee bar and then were off to the races because they bumped into their other half and then they started something or it was the inflection point. There's some good stuff like that, and that's nice. I like that I get to take with me. It's like, all right, that this weird little space we created actually, was the right thing for a bunch of people. That's cool.
Don, so where can people find you, your work? Where can they find you online?
Boy, they can't find much of my work. I mean, other than like the blog posts I'm writing for Field Collective. But so the business is Field Collective, and the URL is fueledcollectivemn.com. I don't have a personal site of any nature, but I might correct that one of these days and start producing thought pieces. Oh, of course, Twitter too. Don M. Ball.
Don Pelota.
Yeah.
It took me, I think, 2 years. I speak Spanish pretty well.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years to lock in what the Don Pelota was. You idiot. Like, how could you not realize that? Oh my God. That was one of those moments where I was like, you are so dense. God. Oh man. Okay. Well, Don, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was truly a joy to have you and have this conversation. I feel like we could have gone for 4 hours. So
yeah, I kind of suspect that. Well, thank you for indulging me and letting me rant and rave. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
All right, and that concludes my conversation with Don. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please do take a moment to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy the episode as well, please do share it with a friend or on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media network you may prefer. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you soon.